Hey everyone, this is Damon back again with another video, and if you are new to the channel, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and turn on the notification bells so that you can be notified of content that is uploaded in the future. So today, I wanted to, it's been a few days, but I wanted to talk about my honest first impressions and give my honest review of Ghostbusters Afterlife. So this is Monday as I'm recording this. It's been out for a few days. My wife and I went to go see this Friday night, basically opening night. This was the first movie that we've gotten to see pretty much since the pandemic and since the birth of our son. So we haven't really been to the movies in a year and a half to 2 years. It's been pretty close to 2 years. And yeah, so we finally got a night out. Wait, we put my son to bed at like 8 o'clock, like straight at 8 o'clock, like a little before 8. We left to go to the movies. We had my mother-in-law watching him, just making sure he was. We put him down for the night. He never woke up. And we got home, just making sure he he was in the house. So and she wanted to see this movie too. My wife. We're both huge fans of the original movies from the '80s. And she probably wanted to see it a little more than I did, but I was still very curious. So if you saw my, I did reaction videos. Like one of the first videos I did, I think during the first year I was doing these videos. I think it was back in 2019 when we were still in New York. I did a reaction to that initial teaser that came out, which wasn't really much of a trailer. It was just like the teaser having the music and showing the Ectomobile, and then it said, "Look, coming 2020." This is before there was an official title, and I remember kind of being excited about it and reacting to it like, ooh, like it was just like it hit the nostalgia vibe for me. Um, and then I saw the initial trailer that came out, I guess last year or whatever. Um, I think this was before it got delayed. And I remember seeing that initial trailer, um, and kind of um, not really being too impressed. Um, yeah, the first one, I don't think I like reacted to that one. I reacted to one a few months ago that came out. That was like I think the second trailer that came out, and again I remember not feeling very impressed by it. And I said, well, this looks interesting, but I just didn't, I wasn't getting a vibe from that about it. Like, it didn't quite feel like Ghostbusters to me, but of course I was going to give it a shot because it's Ghostbusters and it's one of my favorite movies I mean, I grew up on that. I was 8 years old when the original movie came out. So I have very fond memories of that movie. And let me put it a little bit more into perspective here, too. My two brothers were autistic as we were growing up. They watched those movies like all the time. If you know anything about autism, you know that like there's this whole repetition going on. So I basically when we were all living at home and they were growing up. I mean, they were a lot younger than me. Um, they watched these things all the time. So I know both movies, both both of the first two movies. I know those movies by heart. Like every beat, I know every musical beat. I know every scene. Like I know when I hear certain music, I know exactly what's supposed to follow. So I'm very familiar with Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Um, so I went into this with an open mind. But I have to say honestly, I just was not that impressed by this movie. I really wanted to like this more than than I. Yeah, I really wanted to like it more. I've been seeing a lot of videos around, a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is like the movie we really. This is the movie that we deserved as fans. This is everything we could have ever hoped for in a sequel and a follow up." But it's not really what I wanted. So there's going to be some spoilers here, obviously. I'm not going to get too much into the plot, but if you know anything about what this is about, it's basically Egon's grandkids. His granddaughter and his grandson, and so the grandson is played by I forget his name from Stranger Things. Um, Finn Wolfhard, is that what it is? I'm not sure what his name was. Yeah, so he's from Stranger Things, and then the girl, I know her name is McKenna Grace. She's the younger one. She's basically the lead character. One thing I'll say right off the bat, she was amazing. She was really good in her role. She was cast perfectly. She really looked like Egon. She looked like Harold Ramis. She acted like him. She looked like him. She acted like she could be his granddaughter. That's one thing I will say for this, is that she did a really great job in this movie, and the acting in this was good. I don't have any qualms with the acting in this movie. Everybody did great with the material that they had. Um, but but they inherit his he has a farm. I guess it's in Oklahoma somewhere. And they play it up that Egon was like this recluse who everybody just he was like this strange old man who owned this farm. Right there, it just seemed weird to me because it plays on the fact that Harold Ramis really did pass away in real life, and and he was on to something apocalyptic coming, which involves the return of Gozer from the first movie. And that's kind of where another one of my problems with this movie was, is that it relied way too much on stuff from the first movie. It was very much a rehash of a lot of that, a lot of the plot lines from that. They didn't even really acknowledge much of what happened in Ghostbusters 2, which I don't know why they didn't. And yes, the other three, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, like pretty much everybody. Annie Potts, she's back. Sigourney Weaver comes back in a cameo at the end of the movie. Yeah, but they all come back. I mean, like we knew they were going to come back, so that was kind of what they were banking on, was the fact that everybody who were fans of the original were going to see this because the original Ghostbusters are reunited, minus Harold Ramis, and I'll get into that like toward the end, that Harold Ramis is kind of involved there. But that's kind of what the plot is. I don't know if I really need to go into too much more of the plot. But I really want to get into the reasons why I wasn't a fan of this. And it basically revolves around three big fundamental things that make these are like, to me, these are like the most important aspects of what makes Ghostbusters Ghostbusters. First and foremost, the number one thing is that it's a comedy. It doesn't take itself very seriously. You watch the first two movies, they did not take themselves at all that seriously throughout the whole thing. There are serious moments in those movies, but for the most part, they're comedies, and even in the darkest of times, in the most like when it's like world-ending stuff in the Ghostbusters movies, they're still joking around. They're like, well, if we're gonna go out, we're gonna go out with a bang. Like it's there's that whole element to the whole movie where, you know, like they're cracking jokes and you want to laugh most of the times. I didn't get that in this movie. This movie had funny moments, you're not laugh out loud, you know, rolling on the floor laughing moments like the first two did. That to me is the biggest fault with this, is that this movie did not feel like a comedy at all to me. And I don't know if it's just the type of humor. I don't know what it is, or the fact that it revolves more around kids. But a lot of it didn't click for me. And even when they show up at the end, like Bill Murray, he acts like, you know, when he's doing his like Venkmanisms toward the end, I wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't feeling it. Even with that, when he seemed more like Bill Murray being an old and tired Bill Murray who didn't want to be there. That's what he felt and sounded like to me. He looked very tired, and he looked like he just didn't want to be there. He looked like worn out. Like, this is not the Venkman that we knew. We didn't get enough of that. Like, enough of any of them in the movie. They're in it like toward the end. Um, but it just when even when they're brought together, I wasn't feeling that they, like, you could tell in the first two movies that everybody enjoyed doing this movie. Like, they enjoyed doing those movies. You could tell everyone loved being there. Even the characters, they loved doing what they were doing. This movie, just not so much. I wasn't getting that. I wasn't getting that fun, lighthearted feeling. I got more of a doom and gloom apocalyptic feeling. And to me, that's not what Ghostbusters is about at all. So right off the bat, that's the first thing that I just felt I wasn't getting from the movie. Secondly, New York. Okay, like, I think Ghostbusters, I think New York. That's part of what made it fun. Part of what made the whole thing fun, and everybody joking around and and kind of not caring what anybody else was doing. Like, the whole thing with the characters is that they didn't give a damn. They really didn't give a crap about what, like, everybody was trying to tell them to do. They just did their own thing. They're like, screw this. We're just gonna. I mean, especially with Venkman, especially with them, they were basically renegades. Like, they were like these rogue scientists who just, well, it's it's gonna cost this much, and yeah, this is like a little bit illegal. We don't have a license to do this, but screw it, because we're not going to be able to do it, and we know what needs to be done. So F you. Like, that's kind of how he was. It's how he was with Walter Peck. Venkman was like, I don't give a damn what you're saying. Just, he just treated him like, it was those kind of things. That whole New York attitude, that was also missing from this movie. I think what might have worked better, and what maybe would have made this a little better for me, is if they were like in upstate New York or something, and the inciting incident brought them to New York, where, okay, we have to come, like, something is happening and it's spreading to New York, and it brought them there, and that's how they come into contact with the original team. And that, to me, would have worked better, instead of having it being some, probably some fictional town in Oklahoma. I think I don't know where they were. I don't know if it was a fictional town or what. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But that, to me, was the other big thing, was New York. I think we really just saw New York at the very, very end of the movie, with the fire, with the original firehouse. It was a post-credit scene where we're seeing New York finally. And the other thing is, we didn't even get the Ghostbusters theme. Like the movie didn't even open with the Ghostbusters theme. If there's something strange in the neighborhood, like the way the first two movies opened. There was like some incident that happened that kind of takes you into the whole thing. Then there's like the title, and this was like a very dead, like, very, like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it was a very, like, serious, like, Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like, there was just something so serious about the fade in, and no fanfare to the logo. Like, no fanfare when the movie opened, and then it takes us to this whole thing with Egon's family, which is, like, very depressing. It was a depressing scenario. Where Egon's daughter is, and she's estranged from him. Everybody's estranged from Egon, and that's the thing that really got me too. Is like, everybody was, even Ray, when they called him, he's like, I hope he goes to hell. And then they're like, well, he died, and he's like, oh man, he died. Yeah, and that, to me, was like so shocking. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, they were all so tight. And he had to just shut out everybody from his life, and it was so depressing. I mean, the story itself, I don't have necessarily a problem with the story. It was just the way the story was told. And then it kind of brings me to my third point, which is the main characters were really rooted around kids who were like teenagers, basically. This was the thing I was the most worried about too was the kids, and it wasn't necessarily that they were bad characters or anything. I don't have anything against them necessarily. Just for the purposes of passing the baton on to a younger generation, which is what I always assumed that they would do. I wasn't expecting it to be teenagers. I was expecting it to be maybe adults in their late 20s or early 30s, like people who are experiencing life. These kids have not experienced life yet. Like they're still in high school. They don't know what it's like really out in the real world yet. I feel like they don't have enough experience. They don't have enough life experience to kind of take this on and make it a franchise. To me, those are like the three big things that just like it was the chemistry between the original characters, and there was some chemistry between all these kids, but again, it just like they were kids. And I just wasn't getting this vibe. It didn't feel like a Ghostbusters movie to me. And I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but I think the 2016 Ghostbusters movie did a much better job of of feeling like a Ghostbusters movie. And I said it. I think in my first reaction video to that teaser, I think I said it like way back when, that I did not hate the 2016 all-female reboot of Ghostbusters. What I hated about the movie, what I didn't like, was that it was a reboot, that they did not treat it like a legacy of, well, this is a passing of the torch to these new people. They treated this as if it was a completely new story, which sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. This is a situation where it didn't work for me. That is something I didn't want. But if you get past the fact that it's a reboot, it was a very decent movie. I mean, they were all like really funny. Like I had a lot of times during that where I laughed during that movie. Chris Hemsworth was hysterical in that movie. That movie came out right before Thor Ragnarok. That movie showed, oh, he's capable of being funny. He was hysterical in that movie. I mean, it wasn't like exactly the same as the other movies, but the movie was funny. Yes, it didn't take itself very seriously. Number one. Number two, New York. Number three, the chemistry between the characters. They all kind of felt generic. They felt like they worked well together. And again, it was sort of the same situation. Like they just, they were doing their own thing regardless of what everybody else, regardless of what they were allowed to do. They did these things because they had to. And to me, though, that makes a Ghostbusters movie, at least it felt like Ghostbusters. Yeah, and this was just boring to me. It took it took really long time to kind of get interesting. Yeah, I mean, like I'll give you an example. These are the things that I want to see in a Ghostbusters movie. See, to me, these are the things. I'm going to give you specific examples from those first two movies. Okay, I want to see. I want to see a ghost driving a cab in New York, and somebody getting in a cab and basically ghost driving them around, almost crashing into people. I want to see people at a dock working at the dock supervisor, seeing the Titanic arrive and saying, "Well, better late than never." I want to see that. I want to see a dead ghost. I want to see a ghost jogging in Central Park, checking his pulse. I want to see ridiculous crap like this. And when there's like an apocalypse coming, it needs to be this big, huge marshmallow man marching through, crushing things in Times Square with this big, stupid grin on his face. And they're looking and say, well, there's something you don't see every day. That's what I want to see in a Ghostbusters movie. This movie didn't have that. The closest moment that it got with that was the little tiny marshmallow men that were basically like cooking themselves and making s'mores. Like that's the closest that's like the best of thing we got from that felt like the original movies. And that's a scene that we saw, I think, a few months ago as a sneak peek. That was really the only scene I can think of. and I'm not counting the terror dogs, like the Keymaster and the Gatekeeper. They were meant to be scary. They were like the one scary part of that's great that they brought them in there. But 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 yeah, getting into that, it's the plot was basically we're seeing Gozer again, right down to seeing the temple emerge, having a keymaster and a gatekeeper possessing a male and female character, and having this whole thing come about again. It was like almost an exact. Like they were trying too hard to give us these Easter eggs, and like it was just more was these things that I can just tell as I was watching. There's all these things like, oh, remember this? Here this is. Remember that? There it is. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I remember these things, but like I have my memories already. I don't need to retread all of this again. Some movies are really guilty of this. I mean, as much as I kind of like Star Wars, The Force Awakens, it was definitely like a recap of it was kind of the first movie all over again. It was A New Hope. It was a big complaint a lot of people had, even though I liked it. Um, yeah, I'm just using that as an example. And even like the musical score, the musical score just sounded exactly the same. It sounded like a carbon copy of the first movie. It felt like what you know what it felt like. It felt like there's a thing they do. I don't know exactly what they call it. It's like that temp music that they use, where people will shoot like a pilot of a TV episode or something like that, of a TV show, or they'll do some movie, and they before they compose the music for it, sometimes the director will use an existing score to kind of map out how, like the kind of emotion that they want to convey in the scene. So they'll use an existing score, like a really powerful score, and say this is kind of like we need something to show, like it's like a temporary that we will eventually build a new score over this. And a lot of times they'll say they fell in love with the original the way it was, like, and that's kind of what they do. And that's what this felt like to me. This felt like they just took the original score and put it into scenes that they felt fit. And that was what was very jarring to me. It really threw me off, and it kind of took me out of the whole thing. It made it feel kind of like fan fiction to me. And this is me speaking from the perspective of somebody who writes fan fiction stories. This felt like fan fiction to me. So it wasn't a terrible movie, because I'm already going on. This is like a long review. So I just like that's what I want to say. It wasn't like a terrible movie. It could have been a much worse movie. It was decent. Even Paul Rudd, like he was just Paul Rudd. He wasn't that entertaining in the movie. It was a little bit of a disappointment that he wasn't more entertaining than he usually is. Yeah, and the original Ghostbusters, just they looked and felt old, like they sounded old, except for Ernie Hudson. That guy still looks damn good. He can never he always looks good, and still sounds good, whatever he does. He was kind of the exception to that. But I feel like there were more things I wanted to say, but this is already running long, so that's pretty much where I stand with Ghostbusters Afterlife. Yeah, I think the only other thing I'll say is just I would have rather they not made a sequel, period. I feel like this just didn't really convey the spirit, the the vibe of the first movie. I just wasn't getting that same feeling. Yeah, I wasn't getting that comedy vibe from this movie at all. Ghostbusters is one of those movies that I feel just honestly, I don't need a sequel to the original movies. There are a few things that I feel like that with, like the Back to the Future trilogy is perfect in my mind. You never ever need to do another Back to the Future movie ever again. kind of the same thing with Ghostbusters. The first movie was great. Second movie was still good. It wasn't a terrible movie. I liked Ghostbusters too. It was a little goofy, but it was still pretty much like the first movie. You did not need to make any other movies. The video game was probably the best continuation they could have ever done to continue the storyline. But I just, this is one of those things, like, I feel you did not need to make this. They should just be done with it. I know they want to make money, but you know what? I'm done with Ghostbusters. I'm happy with what I had. I don't need another Ghostbusters movie. That's kind of how I feel. So, what are your thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife? Do you agree with anything that I said? Have I hit it? Have I struck a chord? Do you think I'm completely off the mark, and why? Or do you think that there's something legitimate to what I'm saying? If you really think about it, if you enjoyed the movie, kudos to you. I'm not going to make anybody feel bad for liking the movie, but it is what it is. This is how I honestly felt about it. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And again, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. And until next time, this is Damon wishing you all a wonderful day.